Hey, look YouTube, and welcome back to a new video with Rams fan YT. In today's video, we are going over my score predictions upcoming week from Tuesday round to Tuesday. We're not going to actually do the next Tuesday's one, just the one slightly before then. But we've got an exciting week coming up. We've got the FA Cup second round qualifying. We've got the North London Derby. We've got MK Dons-Wimbledon, which is always a cracker. A lot of Lancashire versus Yorkshire matchups as well in the league, which are always interesting affairs. And overall, it is still international break, though, so slightly less fixtures than usual, although they are definitely increased due to the FA Cup. Also, note during the FA Cup, if I say the scoreline 0-0, it generally means that I have absolutely no idea what's going to happen, but I probably think a draw is a likely outcome, but wouldn't know what the score necessarily will be. Anyway, let's get straight into the predictions. We've got Barnet versus Altrincham. Barnet did really well last season, and so did Altrincham. Oh, this is a difficult one. Coming into this season, of course, Barnet were a bit more slower this season if we look at the breakdown overall. But they have really grown into it over the last couple of games or so, and now Barnet are in the playoffs. Whereas Altrincham has had a really mixed start to the season. To be honest, not on the greatest run of form themselves. I'm going to go with a 3-0 win to Barnet here. Boston United versus Hartlepool United. Hartlepool have had so many draws in the last 6 games or so, and it's absolutely mental how they are still within touching distance of the playoffs. Boston have picked up form recently, certainly, but I do think Hartlepool will win this one 1-0 to Hartlepool. Dagenham and Redbridge versus Sutton United. A bit of a London, cross-London affair here, with Sutton having had a bit of a poor start to the season, I would say, probably for their expectations, who would want to be coming straight back up. Dagenham Redbridge has had a lot of draws and not many wins, only 1 win so far. So I think in this case, I'm going to go with a Sutton United win, 2-1 Sutton United. Ebbsfleet United versus Aldershot Town. Ebbsfleet are bottom of the league with only 1 point gained all season out of their opening 7 fixtures. Not a good run of fixtures to be on. But they are coming up against Aldershot at home. And Aldershot have really got a bit of mixed form going on right now. And generally, I think that Ebbsfleet, they're going to be desperate, dying for the win. So I'm going to go with a 2-0 win for Ebbsfleet. I know it's a bit out there, but I think if you think about it, they're going to need a result more than Aldershot are at this moment in time. Forest Green Rovers versus AFC Fylde. Forest Green Rovers have won the last 3 games they've taken part in, and drew 1 before that, so a 4-game unbeaten run. Whereas Fylde have started the season well, but has really decreased in quality recently. They lost the last 2. I do think Fylde, so that they don't end up getting too much stuck into that relegation battle, will have a resolute defence, and it'll be a 0-0 draw. Yeah. FC Halifax Town versus Oldham Athletic. FC Halifax Town are like pretty much bang mid-table as you can be, in 14th at the moment, whereas Oldham are drawn the last 3 games, 2 points off the playoffs. Not too bad of a position to be in. I do think, though, that them draw records are really plaguing on my mind. I'm going to have a 2-2 draw between the 2 clubs here. Rochdale v Maidenhead. Rochdale have started the season quite well, all things considering. They are 3 points off the top of the league, so that's quite a solid start. Maidenhead, however, are in the relegation zone, so I think I can only see this going one way. It's going to be a close game, 1-0 to Rochdale. Southend versus Eastleigh. Yeah, so Southend are probably underperforming in 16th. I don't think that's quite where they intend to be at the end of the season. I certainly wouldn't if I was a Southend fan. whereas Eastleigh are doing very well, currently in second place, only a point off the top of the league, Gateshead. So yeah, however, I think Southend probably will need a result a bit more just to get a bit more momentum. And you got to remember that Eastleigh do have a loss in them. They are not unbeaten at the moment. So I'm going to go 2-0 to Southend. Woking versus Wealdstone. So yeah, an interesting matchup yet again. Woking in mid-table. They started the season really well and have sort of dipped a bit over recent couple of games or so. Wealdstone started horrendously. They have had that middle form of a point, a win and a point, but they did lose their last game. I do think it will be a close game, this one, a 1-1 draw, to be honest. Yeovil Town versus Solihull Moors. Yeovil currently residing in 7th with 12 points. Solihull Moors in 15th with 8 points. I don't think this is going to be too surprising. With a 1-0 win to Yeovil. York City versus Braintree Town. Yes, York City are doing really, really well. Unexpectedly so, actually, sitting and residing in that 5th spot with 14 points so far. That's averaging 2 points a game, which is not that bad of a start of the season at all. Braintree, however, have drawn the last 4 games in a row, and they are unbeaten in 5. So that is certainly a run which is quite interesting. I do think it's going to come to an end here. I think York are going to win 3-0. In the EFL Trophy, we've got a couple of games going on here. We've got Wrexham versus Salford. And I do think Wrexham will win this. They're on a really good run of form at the moment. 3-2 to Wrexham. And then Harrogate Town versus Doncaster Rovers. Quite an interesting Yorkshire matchup here. I do think Doncaster at the moment are much more stronger in the league. So I do think that they will be focusing on that. And as a result, Harrogate will win 3-1. On a Friday night, we have the championship occasion of a Yorkshire derby as such of Hull City versus Sheffield United. Hull have started this season really poorly, in my opinion. Sheffield, bit of mixed results, but I think they will do well this season. I'm going to go 2-0 to the Blades. On to the Saturday's Premier League occasions of Southampton versus Manchester United. I don't believe it's... Yes, I think Southampton haven't actually yet to have a win this season. They've lost all 3 of their opening games. Manchester United won their opening game, but have lost the last 2. So both aren't on that great run of form, but I do think Manchester United will win this one 1-0 to the Mancunian side. Brighton and Hove Albion versus Ipswich Town. Now, Brighton, as ever, start the season incredibly well. They won the first 2 and drew their last occasion, so currently sitting in 3rd. Not too bad at all. Ipswich picked up a point in their last game against Fulham, which will do a load of boost for confidence, realistically. I think Ipswich could get a point here. I'm going to go with a 1-1 draw, because I think Ipswich can pull out an occasional shock result. Crystal Palace versus Leicester City. Both of these teams have only picked up 1 point so far this season, so neither of them are really looking that strong at the moment. I do think Crystal Palace home advantage 2-1 to Palace. Fulham versus West Ham United. These teams are both next to each other, although Fulham have gained an extra point. I do think on paper Fulham's team is slightly better, and I do think West Ham are having a bit of a mixed start to the season, trying to adjust to Lopetegui's style of play. So until they do adjust, 5-0 to Fulham, which may come as a bit of a shock to some of you, but that's certainly what I'm thinking in terms of where my head's at. It happened last season. I can see it happening again at the moment. Liverpool versus Nottingham Forest. How on earth are Nottingham Forest unbeaten? I do not know. But thankfully, so is Liverpool, who have won the last 3 games. Easy, bulldoze as you will, 3-0 to Liverpool. Manchester City versus Brentford. Manchester City, top of the league, to no one's surprise. Brentford currently sitting in 6th, which is a really good start to the season. But I do think this may be a little bit too much for the London side. I'm going to go 1-0 to the Citizens. Aston Villa versus Everton. Aston Villa sitting in 7th, equally as good start as Brentford probably. Everton, in their usual vein of form, bottom of the league, haven't picked up a single point yet, and conceded 10 goals already and only scored 2. It's looking pretty dire. However, Sean Dyche does know when things are rock bottom how to actually get a result, and I do think this could be one of them. 2-1 to Everton, a bit of a shock result there. AFC Bournemouth versus Chelsea. So AFC Bournemouth, interestingly, have actually started the season better than Chelsea, although both have had some decent accumulations in the last 2 results. Do you think both of these teams are coming in probably about equal to each other? So I'm going to go with a 0-0 draw, but they were cancelling each other out. On to the Championship now, which is a very, very interesting matchup. Our first one, we've got Leeds United and Burnley. Both of these will probably be looking with half an eye on getting promotion back to the Premier League. I think Leeds at the moment have started the season marginally better by a point, but haven't actually been beaten yet. So I do think they're going to win this one. I'm going to go 3-1 to Leeds. Millwall versus Luton. Yeah, Millwall started the season poorly. They lost the first 2, but they have picked up 4 points in their last 2 games, which is quite a good piece of form compared to Luton, which lost their last 2 and have only picked up 1 point so far. I do think Luton are going to be desperately coming in for this result then. I'm going to go 0-0 in terms of this one. Oxford United versus Stoke City. Oxford are doing marginally better by 4 goals over Stoke at the moment. So both of these teams are coming in with exactly the same form. It's going to be almost impossible to predict anything else than a draw. So I'm going to go with a 1-1 draw between these 2 sides, and pretty much a pretty equal game, all things considering. Blackburn versus Bristol. Blackburn sitting in 5th, unbeaten at the moment. Very, very strong start to the season. Bristol, however, in their usual vein of form of being mid-table, although that last game that they had against Derby was an absolute shocker by them, losing 3-0 there. And I do think the international break sort of came at the wrong time. So I think Blackburn Rovers 2, Bristol 1. Derby versus Cardiff. Derby have lost 1-1, lost 1-1. So if we're going to go with that vein of form, which I think we probably will, I do think we'll lose, even though this is a must-win game, really, for Derby. Cardiff are bottom of the league, and I do hope we win it, but I just feel we won't. I think Cardiff will win at 1-0. It'll be like a really fluky goal, and it would just be a horrible game to watch at Pride Park. Although our Pride Park form is good, so I'm hoping I'm wrong here. Middlesbrough versus Preston North End. Middlesbrough starting this season fairly well so far, sitting in 7th place. Whereas if we look on the other end, Preston North End, only 1 win so far. They had to change and bring in Heckingbottom. I don't think there's going to be much difference here, though. Middlesbrough to win 4-0. I'm sorry, Preston, but this does feel like one of them occasions that Borough are just going to run riot. Plymouth versus Sunderland. Plymouth at home is always a tough case go, especially seeming the away side, even though they do have a passionate following, do have to go 8 hours away, pretty much. I think it is. All the way from Sunderland to Plymouth. That's a long old journey. So I think for that reason, and I know Sunderland are top of the league and have won the last 4, but I do think Plymouth will win this one. 2-0 to Argyle. Just purely because home advantage, long distance. Sheffield Wednesday versus QPR. QPR is mid-table as you can be right now. Lost 1, drawn 2, 1-1. Yeah, that's pretty mid-table form at present as ever, really. Sheffield Wednesday have lost their last 3, though. So I think Sheffield Wednesday at home will probably be looking for a result here. And I think they're going to get it. I'm going to go 2-1 to Wednesday. I do think that'll be an interesting game. Swansea versus Norwich. Swansea and Norwich pretty much equal at the start of the season. Norwich have a point more, not much to split the two. I do think home advantage, therefore, will play a part. 2-1 to the Swans. Watford versus Coventry. Now, Watford have started the season really well in third place, although they did lose their last game. Coventry, however, have really been in poor form, all things considering, on their behalf. But I do think because Coventry will be wanting to get that playoffs at the end, will win this one. I'm going to go 2-1 to Coventry. I can't really explain the reason why, other than Mark Robbins pulls out these results, doesn't he? On to League One, we got Mansfield versus Cambridge, which is a pretty even game, all things considering, at the moment. We're seeing, well, probably not. Mansfield are 14th and have only lost one. Cambridge are 23rd, having only drawn one and lost the rest. But I do think I've got a really weird feeling that Cambridge will win this one, because I don't think they will be the worst team this season and will actually manage to clutch out a result out of nowhere. It's a 3-0 to Cambridge. I know it's a mad result, but we're all for mad results on this channel, because if you're new around here and you don't know, well, I don't normally sound like this, for one. But also the fact that I go with the mad results. Northampton versus Wycombe Wanderers. Wycombe is sitting in nice and pretty in 16th, having won one and drawn of the last two results. Northampton are unbeaten in the last three. It's going to be a pretty close one, but I do think Wycombe will win this one. 2-0 to Wycombe Wanderers. Just think they'll need them points slightly more. Blackpool versus Exeter. Now, Exeter started the season on the opening day with a good, solid win, but then lost the last two and did win the last time. So they've been a bit mixed so far, Exeter. I do think Blackpool have been fairly poor. They lost the opening two games and then they drew the next two under Keogh. However, they did bring in Steve Bruce, which is always an interesting appointment. And I do think Steve Bruce was treated quite unfairly at Newcastle. He had a remit to keep them up and he kept them up. It was incredibly boring football, though. He does play the most boring and dull football, but it does bear out results. So I'm going to go with a 2-0 win for Blackpool here. Bolton Wanderers versus Huddersfield Town. Now, Huddersfield started the season really well, winning the opening 3 games of the season, but they did lose their last game before the international break. But Bolton have started and stuttered really, really badly at the moment, and I don't see them getting anything here. I'm going to go 2-1 to the Terriers. Bristol Rovers versus Wigan Athletic. Wigan, I would have thought, would have done slightly better than hovering just above the relegation zone in 20th. That is certainly not what you want to see. Bristol Rovers are doing all right. They didn't have an international break, of course, but they are currently in 9th, having played 5 games instead of the normal 4, which most people have played. So yeah, but I do think Bristol Rovers, Wigan aren't in any good shape right now. 4-1 to Bristol Rovers. I just see it being an absolute romping. Crawley Town versus Stockport County. Stockport are yet to be beaten so far, and a win would surely put them top of the league if Wrexham lose, which will be interesting. However, against Crawley have lost the last 2, but they won their opening 2. And I think we're seeing already that Crawley can be a really random team. So I do think 1-1 draw, not really sure where we're going to be going with this one. Peterborough United versus Lincoln City. I mean, some might consider this local rivalry. It's a bit of a tasty occasion anyway. Lincoln I had as a heavy favour for an underdogs, and they are currently 6th, so they aren't actually disappointing. Peterborough, however, are 11th, probably underperforming, and I think coming into this, Peterborough will need a win, and 2-0, I'm going to go with Posh to win by. Home advantage at London Road, one of them things that just, they're going to need it more than Lincoln. Reading versus Leyton Orient. Reading are currently in 8th, really bit of a mixed start to the season, a solid mixed start to the season, but even so, it's hardly what you call consistency. Leyton Orient, however, are yet to even pick up a point. And to be fair, if they lose this game, I'm all for saying sack the manager. Is it still Richie Wellens, or did they replace Richie Wellens with someone? Let me just check. Because I think they did have, they still have Richie Wellens in. And I do think if he does lose this game, serious questions are going to be asked, and he probably has to be sacked. Because for me, I'm not really. He was good last season. That's the annoying thing, but he's just not been good at the start of this season. But I do think if he gets a point here, he's fine. His job is safe. It's only if he loses for me. I'm going to go with a 1-1 draw, and he's going to breathe a sigh of relief for another day. But realistically, he does need to up his game a bit. Rotherham United versus Burton Albion. Burton have drawn the last 3 games in a row. Burton are one of them teams which just managed to stay up every single season, and no one quite knows how. Rotherham have had so much mixed form, though. They lost the opening game of the season, then they drew, then they lost, then they've won, then they've drew. They have played 5, so more than most of League One at the moment. But I think here at the New York Stadium, I think Rotherham are going to get a job done. 3-1 for the Millers. Shrewsbury Town versus Charlton Athletic. Charlton are sitting in 5th. They are doing quite well so far, having only lost 1 of their opening 5 fixtures. Shrewsbury have only won 1 of their 5 fixtures. So what I'm about to say may come as a bit of a shock. I'm going to go with a 0-0 draw. I do think Shrewsbury, in terms of, will try to be getting out of our relegation zone and not want to do what they did last season, which was spend ages fighting into it, only just to survive at the end of the season. It wasn't pretty to watch. Stevenage versus Barnsley. Stevenage, I thought were going to do better than they did. They are doing, rather. But they've only picked up 4 points so far. And Barnsley, however, they are unbeaten in the last 4. So that is a really good form from the Tykes at the moment. But I do think Stevenage will win this one, because I'm going to go and carry on with my underdog mentality. They're going to go in and be dark horses. 2-1 to Stevenage here. On to League 2, and it is a match where I think everybody has been waiting for. The amazing, I don't know what they actually call the derby. Which one is the real Wimbledon derby? Maybe, there you go. I'll give them that name. But a really, really exciting game. It always is, always close. Wimbledon started the season relatively well, 3 wins out of the opening 4 games. Whereas MK, not as great. They're down in 14th. Really mixed form. Only 2 wins from the opening 5 games they've taken. So I think AFC Wimbledon will win this one. It's going to be marginal, going to be narrow. Going to go 1-0 win to Wimbledon. Swindon Town versus Newport County. Somewhat of a local rivalry. They're quite close to each other. Not quite enough for me to consider it a proper rivalry, but decent game nevertheless. Newport have started the season quite well. They've won 3, lost 2. Whereas if we're looking at Swindon, they've gone draw, lost, draw, lost, draw. But I do think it's about high time that Swindon got a win. They don't want to be dragging themselves into this relegation battle for long parts of the season, because I don't think they'll have the willpower to do so. 2-0 to Swindon here, just so that they give themselves a little bit of breathing space. Accrington Stanley versus Crewe Alexandra. Accrington Stanley have only picked up 2 points so far this season. They are sitting in 23rd in the relegation zone. Not a great place to be. Crewe in 13th, unbeaten in the last 3. But I do think Crewe is one of them places that you can get a point. I think Accrington will be coming into this and they'll get another point and continue that form. 0-0 for Stanley here. I do think a point doesn't really help either team, but it could get Accrington out of relegation zone if Carlisle lose. Bromley versus Notts County. Bromley started the season quite well with 2 wins, but then they lost 2 and they drew with their last 1. So really mixed form at the moment. 2-2, and I'm probably going to go with another 2. Notts County, I know, are doing well. They've unbeaten in 5. Really, really solid form at the moment. which is what the Notts team will be wanting to see. But I do think at this one, a 1-1 draw would be fair. Bromley continuing their 2-2-2 sort of pattern, which seems a bit odd at the moment. Carlisle versus Fleetwood. Now, Fleetwood started the season all right, win, draw, but they did lose their last one. They've only played 4. Carlisle have played 5. They lost 1 and then lost the last 3. And I am aware that Carlisle United have just sacked, well, not just, but relatively recently sacked Paul Simpson, which is very, very much an interesting decision. Not one I would have taken. I can see why they did. If I was going to sack Paul Simpson, I would have done it at the end of last season and given a new manager pre-season instead of starting the season with him. Because then you've sort of got to back him, don't you? Mark Birch has been put in as the interim manager, who has only ever managed Penrith. Which again, not great. I'm not entirely sure Mark Birch is going to necessarily be the person who's going to be the long-term solution. But I do think changing manager, it always has a bit of a result, even if it's not one you wanted. I'm going to go with a 1-1 draw here. I think Fleetwood are sort of going to be stagnating a bit in this league, in my opinion. Carlisle as well. It looks like a lot of my predictions with these teams coming down, not doing well, are transpiring, to be honest. I don't think I'm wrong with a lot of them. If you look at the ones who got relegated, they're all in the bottom half. So, yeah, I don't think I'm going too badly wrong at the moment. 1-1 draw here. Gillingham versus Tranmere Rovers. Gillingham are in 4th. They lost their last game, but they did win the opening. Well, they won 3 and drew 1 of the opening 4 games, which was really impressive to see. Tranmere are actually the one of 2 teams yet to be beaten in this league, as they have picked up 8 points but only played 4 games. So Tranmere are having quite a good run of form, and I think Gillingham will want to try and get back to that position. But I think interesting, close game, 1-1 draw here for me. Grimsby Town versus Barrow. Grimsby are doing all right. They're sort of mixed at the moment. Loss, win, loss, win, loss, win, loss, win, loss. So really mixed form at the moment. Whereas Barrow has started the season really well. They've only lost once, unbeaten in the last 3. But I'm going to go for a little bit of a shock here. It would follow Grimsby's pattern of that loss-win sort of scenario. And I'm going to go with a 2-1 win. Grimsby Town is a horrible place to know. Well, so is Barrow's ground. But I do think that Grimsby's stadium does become a bit of a fortress. So, yeah, 2-1 to Grimsby. Morecambe versus Colchester. Morecambe are doing really badly at the start of this season. They've lost the first 5 games. In all honesty, I would have thought Morecambe would have had the first casualty in manager because they are woeful. To put it brutally, Derek Adams should be put in the bin and sacked. I don't care what your opinion is. I know he's done bits in this league before, but at the moment he is being horrendously shook and about, and Morecambe are doing woeful. They just can't score. They haven't actually scored yet. That's the thing. The defence isn't too bad. They just can't score. And I think that's going to continue. So I think it's going to be a close game. But Colchester as well. Yeah, doing all right. Well, I thought they would have done slightly better. But no, I reckon I'll back them for a win for one. 1-0 to Colchester. Because, as I said, they don't have a worse defence. Morecambe, they've just not scored a goal yet. I believe actually they've lost all their games by 1-0. I believe that is actually genuinely the case, which is really weird. When was the last time you saw 5 1-0 losses on a bounce? Well, we might want to see 6, in my opinion. So I don't think that is actually too wacky of a prediction. Port Vale versus Chesterfield. I'm impressed with Chesterfield. I really am. I'm glad they're doing well and have adjusted to League Two life like nothing. A duck to water, as some would say. I think they can go from strength to strength still. But you've got Port Vale. And Port Vale, they're such a random team. They just end up in mid-table doing and then sneaking into the playoffs come the end of the season, but they just have a result in them. 2-1 to Port Vale. It's going to be controversial amongst my friends in the Derbyshire circles, but I do think Port Vale could win this one. Salford City versus Cheltenham Town. Salford are 19th. They are unbeaten over the last 4. Meanwhile, Cheltenham aren't doing great. They won their opening game, but then lost the last 3. But they did win their last game. I do think they're going to pretty much cancel each other out here. A 0-0 draw probably won't suit either team, but it will probably be a more fair result of where both teams are at the moment. Walsall versus Bradford City. Walsall started the season quite well. They won the opening 2, then we lost, then we've won, and then we lost. So currently sitting in 6th. That's not too bad for Walsall, I don't think, overall. Bradford are equally doing well. They're only gained an extra point so far. So really quite close game. I think it's going to be a really good game to watch this one. Bradford 3, Walsall 2. I think it's going to be a cracker. On to the National League, we've got Barnet versus Braintree. Obviously, this will have changed after the midweek fixtures, but we're going to go a bit on the form at the moment. Barnet are a team I think are going to do really well this season. Braintree, yeah, as I said earlier in this video, are unbeaten 5 with but the last 4 are all draws. I think Barnet are going to win this one 4-2 for the Bees. But yeah. Boston United versus Aldershot Town. Aldershot are really mixed at the moment. They're either going to win or going to lose. Never quite sure. Boston are inconsistent, but not great inconsistent as well. I'm going to go with a 0-0 draw here. Suits the theme of Boston's inconsistency down to a T, to be honest. Ebbsfleet versus Hartlepool United. Hartlepool, I think, are going to get another 1-0 draw here. I know I backed Ebbsfleet for a win in the last game, but I don't think they're going to do that well this season. So I still think a 1-0 win be a fair reflection. Ebbsfleet will stay rooted to the bottom of the table. Forest Green Rovers versus Wealdstone. Forest Green are starting well this season. Wealdstone, not really, in 22nd. But I do think Wealdstone will come in with a resolute defence, bit of a scalp to take Forest Green at this level. 0-0 draw here. It's going to be a scrappy one, if you ask me. On to FC Halifax Town versus Eastleigh. Halifax probably not starting as well as they probably wanted. 14th. It's a bit mixed. I think they probably would have thought they would have done better. But Eastleigh are flying at the moment. So I'm just going to see, I'll just see Eastleigh winning this one. 3-2 to Eastleigh. Rochdale versus Solihull Moors. Now, I know Rochdale have started well this season, but I do think Solihull Moors just randomly have a result in their locker, and they're normally much better than they are now. So I'm going to go 2-1 to Solihull Moors here. Southend United versus Sutton United. So yeah, Southend currently sitting in 16th. Probably want to do a bit better. Same with Sutton in 13th. I think we're going to cancel each other out. Another 0-0 draw here. I do think that's going to be the case here. Tamworth versus Maidenhead United. Tamworth had a really good defence last season, but Maidenhead have been in this league a while. Both are on 5 points as I currently speak. Both in relegation zone. Really nothing much to separate these two teams. 0-0 draw written all over this game. Neither team are in particular free-flowing form at the moment. So, although I'm going to say Tamworth's defence Not as good as it was last season, Tamworth. Not as good as it was last season. You really need to get back to the basics again. Woking versus Oldham Athletic. Woking, interesting form at the moment. Same with Oldham. Bit of an all over the shop game here. Could go any direction. 1-0 to Oldham, I'm going to go with. But you could disagree, and I would say I could see the valid and meritness in it. Yeovil Town versus Altrincham. Yeovil are doing all right, relatively speaking, averaging grand total of just under 2 points a game. They won the opening two, lost the middle two, won the last two. So at the moment, not too bad of a form. Altrincham, however, a bit more mixed. I'm going to have a 1-1 draw here. I don't think that's what Yeovil will want. Alti are not an easy team to push over in this league, certainly not. York City versus Fylde. York sitting in 5th at the moment, really good job. But I do think Fylde, they are such a wacky team. They could just get a result out of absolutely nowhere, and this could just be one of them. 3-1 to Fylde here. And then the final one in the National League, we've got Dagenham and Redbridge versus Gateshead. For me, it's fairly obvious that Gateshead are going to win this one. I don't think Dagenham are providing much. 4-2 to Gateshead here. I think it's going to be a good game altogether. Right, on to the FA Cup ones. Remember, if I say it's a 0-0, it means I probably think it's going to be a draw, but I haven't actually got a Scooby-Doo. AFC Stoneham versus Salisbury, quite close to each other. For those who don't know where Stoneham is, it's not a real place, but is based in Eastleigh, so not far from Salisbury here. I'm going to go with a 0-0 draw. So, as I say, one of them wacky ones. Aveley versus Royston Town. Amazingly, I don't think these two teams have played each other, and we really should have, because they've both been on lots of leaps and bounds over the recent years. 0-0 draw for this one. Bath City versus Merthyr Town. Merthyr were much better back in the day, historically, than they are now. Bath, however, are a good, solid outfit in their respective league. 0-0 again. I think Merthyr will try and ground this one out. Bishop's Cleeve versus Torquay United. Always one of them ones, I think, that Torquay are coming in as massive favourites, but it's a Bishop's Cleeve at home, 0-0 draw, because Bishop's Cleeve will come on looking for the upset. Buxton versus Barwell. Buxton were in the Northern Prem for quite a while, and so they did actually end up playing Barwell quite a bit back in the day. Barwell, some small village in Leicestershire. I'm going to go with a 1-1 draw here. I'm actually going to predict one, but I do think I know going to be that result. Chester versus Hebburn Town. Hebburn I've seen twice now in my life, and every time I go back to that ground, they've built a new stand, or have a new range of alcohol on, or I've got more fans, got some kids, ultras chanting loud for about 5 minutes before going off to play football on the side pitch. They've got a cemetery behind one end of the goal. It's really, really interesting stadium, actually, and they are really going places. They started in the Northern Premier League really, really well at the start of this campaign. Really exciting team, and I'm looking forward to when I get back up to the North East, seeing them again. Chester, however, are a team which is underperforming in all the metrics at the moment. Most people had them as somebody to watch out for to winning the league. Hasn't really transpired as of yet. It is of a diva, but I do think you look at Chester, they're a team which really should be winning this on paper, but Hebburn won't be any mugs. 0-0, one of them random draws. Chichester City versus Slough Town. Slough started the season really, really well. However, they did have a slip up in their last game. Chichester, however, got promoted. Was it last season or the season before? Anyway, relatively recently. And so Chichester, close game, 0-0 draw, not a clue. Cray Valley Paper Mills versus Chesham United. Yeah, I'm surprised these two haven't actually played each other before as well. Chesham are a team which probably want to focus a bit more on the league. In all honesty, I know all non-league teams want to do well in the FA Cup. But I think Cray Valley Paper Mills will be at home looking for an upset. 0-0 draw again. One of them random draws. Curzon Ashton versus Barnoldswick Town. Curzon again flying high in the league. I'm not really keeping on top of the Northwest Counties League as such, so I'm not sure how Barnoldswick Town are doing it domestically in their Tier 9. But I do think if you look at their cup run, they've done always managed to drag things out to a replay. So a 0-0 draw here, because I do think you look at it, they are both going to be teams that Barnoldswick will want this more, I think. Dunstan UTS versus Scarborough Athletic. Dunstan had that weird hearse, didn't they, on their pitch during pre-season last season, which was a slight oddity. Scarborough, however, I think are going to win this one. I do think so. 3-2 to Scarborough. Yeah, I think Scarborough will want to try and get a good cheeky cup run if they're going to end up in mid-table again this season, which they may well do. It's going to be one of the things to look. You want something to mark out your season, don't you? Eastbourne Borough versus Boreham Wood. Yeah, actually, weirdly with this one, I think Boreham Wood will be more focused domestically. Eastbourne, I know, are doing well at the moment, but I do think it's one of them things that Boreham Wood won't really be bothered with. So 4-1 to Eastbourne. Enfield Town versus Peterborough Sports. Yeah, National League North versus National League South occasion. Both an interesting matchup. Both probably around about equal at the moment if you look at it. I'm actually going to look at points here because I don't think there's much splitting them at all. You look at Peterborough Sports on 7 points. If you look at Enfield Town, you've got them in the National League South on the opposite side. You've got them on 3 points, although they are truly horrendous at the moment, and I probably would sack the manager at Enfield Town purely because you look at it, and for me, yeah, I know they got promoted and it was the manager which got them promoted, but you've got to be serious of this. Like, if you want to stay in the league, you've got to be competitive. So I do think, for me, Enfield Town should sack their manager. I mean, Gavin McPherson, don't know that much about him. So, again, bit of an unknown quantity. Oh, where do we go with this? 1-1 draw for me, because Enfield Town will need some sort of result to get back into some momentum and swing of things. Hemel Hempstead Town versus Bishop Stortford. I remember Bishop Stortford last season being the National League North and being an absolute mental that they were in that league. They didn't do well in that league. They did actually pretty shoddy, all things considering. Well, Hemel Hempstead last season were equally just shoddy. But Hemel Hempstead have started this season very, very well. I think they're going to continue that form here. 3-2 to the Tudors. Hereford versus Ilkeston Town. Yeah, so Hereford at home here at Edgar Street. Ilkeston Town will be coming. They had that good cup run not that long ago in the FA Cup when they were on TV. Could be a draw here, 0-0 draw. Hornchurch versus #United. Yeah, Hornchurch got promoted last season. Have actually done all right at the moment in the National League South, around about mid-table. #United, it does look a bit like that team has gone off the boil recently. Spencer FC, what are you doing? In terms of, like, you look at it, they didn't do well last season in the Isthmian League. So yeah, 3-0 to Hornchurch here. Horsham versus Dorking Wanderers. I mean, you could consider this a bit of a local rivalry, all things considering. We're not too far away from each other, Horsham and Dorking. I do think Dorking more focused domestically on the league. I'd certainly would say that at the moment. Horsham, however, will be definitely wanting an upset here. 2-0 for Horsham. Kidderminster Harriers versus Leek Town. Kidderminster are 100% focused on the league here. where it's Leek will come looking for an upset. So a 0-0 draw can go anyway. Kings Lynn Town versus Cheshire. Yeah, interestingly, I think for me, Cheshire didn't do that well last season in the Isthmian League. It was around about 18th, I think they finished. Kings Lynn, though, they didn't do great in the National League North last season. However, this season they've done really, so have started quite positively. So I'm going to go 2-1 for Kings Lynn Town here. Leamington versus Carlton Town. Carlton Town ain't far from where I'm living at the moment. Where I'm sitting at the moment, rather. Whereas Leamington got promoted last season from the Southern League Central. I think it's going to be a 0-0 draw, this. I do think Carlton will want a bit of an upset. Macclesfield versus South Shields. Macclesfield are a huge club, and at home, this will be a really difficult place for South Shields to go, because I actually think Macclesfield could win the Northern Premier League this season. I don't think that's a likely team to be promoted. So 0-0, it can be any draw, any direction. Maidstone United versus Hampton Richmond Borough. Yeah, interesting. These two are drawn each other. They're both in the National League South. You look at the two teams at the moment, neither of which really impressed me. This is an actual 0-0 draw I'm going to go with, not a random draw, an actual 0-0 draw. Mossley versus Chorley. Again, not that far away from each of these two clubs. And Mossley at home, definitely be looking for an upset here. 0-0. Although I do know Chorley like a good cup run themselves. Nailsea and Tickenham versus Chippenham Town. Nailsea and Tickenham at home are going to be a team which will desperately want a result out of this. And I think Chippenham, they're a team which so mixed. Chippenham is so mixed all the time. 0-0 here, random draw. Needham Market versus St Albans City. We saw Needham Market get promoted last season, and we're seeing St Albans City doing quite poorly this season, but so Needham Market. Neither teams really impressed me. Random draw, 0-0. Newcastle Town versus Scunthorpe United. This is a huge scalp, probably the biggest game Newcastle Town have played in years, if ever. And so as a result, one of them random 0-0 draws would definitely be suiting this sort of game, because I think if you look at it, Scunthorpe will come probably more focused on the league. Could even see a cheeky Newcastle upset. We'll see. Oxford City versus Willand Rovers. Oxford are doing dismal this season. Willand Rovers, I'm not really sure because I'm not following that league as such. But I think if you look at the cup runs, they've had a fair few draws so far, Willand. So I'm going to go with one of them random 0-0 draws again. Rushall Olympic versus Sheffield FC. Interesting. Sheffield FC, the oldest football club in the world. Rushall Olympic, though, are going to need a result because the pressure is on at the moment for the manager. I think if you look at it, they're not doing badly, but they are in the relegation zone. I do think they're one of the teams who we desperately want to get out of it. So a cup run, just to even recoup that bit of expenditure they spent on upgrading their stadium to make sure it was National League North requirements. 3-1 to Rushall. Shoalin versus Weymouth. Yeah, I know Weymouth aren't doing well this season, but can't look past this. 3-0 to Weymouth because they'll desperately need a result. Southport versus Hyde United. Hyde, it was about 10 years ago, maybe a bit longer. They were in the conference, weren't they? Southport, at the same time, a former Football League club, falling a bit of hard times. So both of these teams are a bit on hard times at the moment. We're going to have a 1-1 draw, then they will cancel each other out here. Spalding United versus Alfreton Town. Matlock are so unlucky to go out on extra time to Spalding here. And I do think Matlock are going to desperately need to turn that oil tank around. I do hear they got investment, Matlock, from a local businessman. So hopefully move them back in the right direction. But I do want to see them get back competitive sooner rather than later. But a random 0-0 draw here, because I think Alfreton will come up this game. And I don't think Alfreton are really used to being the sort of big boys in a situation. Like, I don't think anyone looks at Alfreton like a scrap. I know they do well in the National League North, but no one looks at it as if it's like, oh yes, we're gonna manage to overcome this team easily. So, yeah, I think Spalding will come in as an underdog here. Spennymoor Town versus Morpeth Town. Yes, that'll be an interesting one to go to, actually. It's not the one I'm planning to go to. I'm planning to go to Blythe Spartans versus Bury, for those who are interested. I think this could be a random draw because I think Morpeth will be wanting to do one of them cheeky cup runs. Spennymoor never normally do well in the cups, do they? So yeah, one of them random 0-0 draws. Stockton Town versus Marine. Marine love a cup run, they really do. But as do Stockton. Both of these teams have historically had huge cup runs. A random 0-0 draw, we're going with it. Tilbury versus Chelmsford City. Again, a bit of a local mismatch here. Tilbury at home will be wanting to cause that upset. Random 0-0 draw. As I said, there's a lot of them. Tonbridge Angels versus Merstham. Yeah, I think Tonbridge Angels here at home. I think this is where Merseham's cup run comes to an end. 2-0 to Tonbridge. Truro City versus Brackley Town. Brackley Town, of course, in the National League North for some reason. Truro City firmly in the National League South. You couldn't be further south if you tried, really. Random 0-0 draw. Because I do think Brackley and Truro both full power go for this. Walton and Ersham versus Farnborough. Yeah, interesting mismatch again. Walton at home, 0-0. Warrington Town versus Radcliffe. This season, that's a National League North occasion. Both of these teams historically being good, successful teams in the Northern Premier League. 1-0 to Warrington Town. I think it's going to be a close game. Could go either way. Welling United versus Chatham Town. This is an actual 0-0. I actually believe this will be 0-0. I think Chatham will come looking for a scrap. They are a bit of an underdog mentality at that club. Welling don't do that well in terms of FA Cup. So yeah, a 0-0 draw. Worthing versus Avon and Waterlooville. Avon and Waterlooville were in the National League South last season or the season before, not that long ago. Whereas Worthing went up a couple of seasons back as well. So I think Worthing are a club on a bit more of an upward direction here. So 3-0 to Worthing. North London derby, which I'm sure a lot of you have been waiting for. Tottenham Hotspur versus Arsenal. I'm going to go with Arsenal 3, Tottenham 2. I think it's going to be a really good competitive game, but I think Arsenal are just a better team at the moment. Wolverhampton Wanderers versus Newcastle United. Going to go with a good, close 2-2 draw, which will probably disappoint Newcastle a bit in their bid to try and get European football this season. But I do think Wolverhampton do have a draw in them. Portsmouth versus West Bromwich Albion. I'm going to go for a Black Country 2-2 draw again. I think Portsmouth and West Brom, both of them are sort of roughly where you'd think they'd be at this stage of the season. You look at it. Well, West Brom, I think, are overperforming slightly in second. So maybe Portsmouth will be a bit of a leveller. Portsmouth in 18th, I don't think it'll be too surprising to see. They've had 3 draws already this season. It could just be another one. On to the final one, Birmingham City versus Wrexham in League One. Birmingham City, I think, are going to win this one 4-1. I think Birmingham are the real deal in terms of if you look at the money spent at the moment, and Wrexham have a bit of an inflated ego. Thank you very much for watching this video. Please subscribe if you're new around here. That'd be hugely appreciated. Towards the end of the week, we will be looking at the best Premier League summer transfers, hopefully. But goodbye for now.